between these three action cameras, besides being expensive, of course, they are extremely good about image stabilization. They pretty much make devices like this, an action camera stabilizer, to be obsolete. And by the way, that's the iSteady Pro 4, the latest and greatest from the company. A very nice solution if you have an old action camera which doesn't have good stabilization or doesn't have any stabilization at all, and you want to bring it back to life. An amazing solution, which is very similar to what the DJI Pocket 2 can do, but at a much better price. Now, I mentioned GoPro is 360 and DJI Action 2, but even with them, and their great stabilization, there are a few practical limitations where it would make perfect sense to have an action camera gimbal. As an example, you can look into this footage where I'm with a scooter, and if you look at me and the scooter, we are super sharp and crisp, and everything around us while I'm riding is a bit blurred. You can see the grass, you can see the pavement, you can see the road. It gives you this nice feeling of something being shot with a very expensive camera here, something that you can see usually on the movie scenes. But actually, this is something very easy to achieve if you have the right kind of action camera, and more importantly, the right kind of action camera gimbal. Just like what happens to most tech gear in 2021, price is a little higher than the predecessor, and by the end of the video, you probably would agree with me that the $135 that Hoentech are asking for this gimbal may be a bit too much. But let's hope to see some serious improvements and cool ideas, because if it's good enough, it would well justify such a purchase. Believe it or not, competition in this segment is not that serious right now, but if I remind you about the fact that each and every smartphone gimbal can turn into an action camera gimbal using such a plate, that just unlocks a whole lot of other options. Now, unboxing, the iSteady series have always been among the best packed gimbals for their budget, class and size, and luckily Hoentech won't disappoint with this 4th generation either. A nice looking box, quite many highlights and specs visible already. Inside, it's great to see carrying a hard case, and just as it used to be with the previous generations, you can actually put there a gimbal with the camera attached. Believe me, this is great for avoiding scratches and issues. First thing to check, the user guide and the quick start guides, well written, full of practical ideas, and please take some time to read them. Being knowledgeable about how your gear works is not cheating. There are 3 types of connectivity cables, for mini USB, micro USB and Type-C, so there's a great chance that you may use the button on the gimbal to trigger the shutter on your action camera, which is really helpful. A basic tripod is also included. Don't expect too much from it, but it's good to have, especially if you plan to make some motion time lapses. Here's the gimbal itself. It has the DNA of the older generations of Hoentech's gimbals, because the design and construction are quite similar if not identical. As a reference, here is one of my favorite smartphone gimbals, the iSteady Mobile Plus, which, as you may notice, has pretty much the same kind of motors and button layout and is close to 3 years old. What is new here is the quick-release clip design, and it looks like it's the gimbal part which most makers have priority about. The pros are so much different to the previous generation, and what I can share from my modest close to 2 weeks experience with this gimbal, they are by far the most convenient and almost really quick releasable. Definitely the best action camera implementation so far, and thanks to the auto-adjustable mechanism, fits almost any kind of action camera. Thinner models, thicker models, and some weird form factors. Well, from the popular models, is the 360 Go series won't fit, and DJI Action 2 is, well, it can theoretically fit, but I guess Hoem have to release a special accessory in order it to be safely attached and the front part not to block the lens. I've successfully tested the iSteady Pro 4 with GoPro Hero 10 and 9, DJI Osmo Action 1, Insta360 SJ Cam SJ10 Pro, a Casio Brave 8, a Casio V50 Pro and many other action cameras. It's fine, it works great. If you wonder about the tech specs, in a nutshell, 3-axis mechanical stabilization, quick-release clip design, splash-proof, compatible with most popular action camera brands, 14-hour battery life, Type-C charging port, different stabilization modes, accessories included, Bluetooth support, smartphone app, and quite compact size and weight. Concerning the controls from the gimbal, you can actually link a cable and you can see the port right here, and the other side of the cable you connect to the USB port of your action camera, and if your action camera supports this function, you will be able to use this button here, as a shutter button, in order to start or stop recording or take some just photos, and possibly use the zoom in and out function. And that all happens thanks to the cable integration. Well, there are some action cameras which will work. GoPro Hero 10, 9, and so on. The DJI Action 2, I actually haven't tried it. The Insta361R works. SJ Camera J10 Pro works as well. With the Casso, there are a lot of ifs because some motos would work, others won't. So the best thing you can do is to try it with your own action camera. And even if it doesn't, that's not too much of a big deal because you can always use the manual recording function. Well, with action cameras, since they don't consume that much battery, if you have a big enough SD card inside, you can just start the recording, do whatever you need to do in terms of movements, and then cut these scenes in post-production. Quick guide for the operation. Using this button, you can power on and off the gimbal. The joystick can point the camera towards the direction of your choice. Here's the mode button. Pan follow, that's the default, and locks all the axes but the horizontal one. There's pan and tilt follow. The camera is leveled horizontally and follows panning and tilting. Lock mode is next. Great if you want to avoid any possible movement while filming. And you want to keep a steady direction. And the POV, or old follow as others call it, which is also used for inception mode. Switching between them is so easy, and you have the LED right next to the mode that you're currently using. I keep on believing that Hollentex gimbals are by far the easiest to use when it comes to choosing a mode. But the LED is barely visible in daytime outdoors, which is the most common use case for filming with an action camera, but it is what it is. And also the shutter button, which can be used instead of pressing the shutter button on the camera, if your action camera supports it, and if you use the corresponding cable. So, too many ifs, as we already mentioned. Here also is a trigger button, which is configurable. Multiple presses can bring it into the so-called selfie mode. I would like to show you some more footage, but also talk about the possible situations where actually having such an action camera gimbal would make perfect sense. Because, well, besides being cool, we need to know what the major advantages are. And I'm going to start with the most obvious thing, and it's the fact that if you have an old action camera, it can bring it back to life. Over here, there's the Casso V50X, a model which is, first of all, very cheap, around $100. It's been released like 3 or 4 years ago. So if you need to shoot something that would have really decent, almost GoPro-like stabilization, buying a gimbal would be a pretty good choice. This whole combo would cost around $250, even less, and that's about half of the price you're going to pay for any of the 3 popular brands we've mentioned earlier in the video. Another good idea, if you have an action camera